Welcome to another edition of Answers for the Family. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza, and for those of you that have been listening, sending in questions and comments, thank you so much. And please continue to help spread the word that each week this show will bring on special guests that can inspire, educate, and in some cases entertain, while bringing answers and options to making our lives happier, healthier, and more successful. And we will introduce you to top professionals and talented authors who are working to make this world a better place for all of us. Now, I would really appreciate it if you could all do me a big favor. Please forward one of our shows to your social media group or to someone you know who can benefit from today's show. This is one of the powerful ways that we together can make a positive difference in the world. Now, unfortunately, with all the negativity and divisiveness out there these days, I hope that you will find answersforthefamily.com, a place that you can go to hear some of the good and the positive that is happening around the world, because I guarantee you it is happening. You just need to find it sometimes. Now, with that in mind, if there was ever a time in recent years that we needed to focus on gratitude, this is the time. Now, my son and I wrote the Attitude of Gratitude Journal, something that at the time was geared toward teens going through some changes in their lives. Well, we're all going through some changes in our lives now. So please go to our website at answersforthefamily.com and download a free copy. It is our gift to you. All I ask is that you subscribe, which is for free, give it 21 days, and comment on whatever platform you listen to us on what focusing on gratitude has meant to you and your family. Now, a quote that is not from the journal, but it is by our guest today. Confidence is the willingness to be ridiculous, luminous, intelligent, and kind as you are, as you really are, without embarrassment. So, and I thought that that was really a good fit for the show today. But let me ask a question. What happens when our dreams of becoming professional athletes, concert pianists, singers, writers, or whatever we excelled at and we loved in our youth becomes impossible? Well, for our guest, Susan Priver, author of the memoir, Dancer Interrupted, a girl obsessed with ballet, a gifted child ballerina, the center of attention without ever having to speak, it was, she believed, the end of her life. Now, a little bit about Susan. She began her career as a ballet dancer and trained at the School of American Ballet in New York. Her professional career in dance included the and I worked on that one too. Igleski Ballet in New York City, the Hanover Ballet in Germany, and finally, the Cleveland Ballet. She settled back in her hometown of Los Angeles and began her acting training with Susan Peretz and Charles Lofton of the Actors Studio and with Bill Traylor of The Loft, now known as The Loft Studio. Since then, Susan has built an extensive resume of dramatic and comedic roles in a variety of contemporary and classic plays on a number of LA stages. Additionally, Susan is a yoga teacher in Pasadena, California. Susan, welcome to Answers for the Family.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I was fortunate that I was able to take a little time and read part of the book, as well as go through some of the other, the other things, as far as where you've spoken and stuff. And I really felt like this is a story that a lot of people really needed to hear, especially those here in Los Angeles, where so many people come for their dreams. So what I'd like to start with is to maybe kind of whet people's appetite a little bit is, do you have any advice for young women who are extraordinarily talented, or at least were at a very, very young age? And what was some of the advice you would give them now if you could look back to when you were at that age and you wished somebody would have told you that?
Well, I was in I want to frame it with this, because I was in a very specific world, which is ballet is very elitist. and very structured and very protected from very much of the outside world. So to give advice to young people without it being under that structure, it would just be that you have to find, no matter what your talent is, whether it's a visual art or dramatic art or a dance art or any of the arts or writing or science or athletics, you need to find your spine or your sense, a core sense of self, which is not through just what other people tell you. Because when you're growing in a world like that requires so much focus and there is so much competition, you need to know that you're okay without that thing, that you are going to be a full person, even if you aren't the best in that thing. Maybe you're the second or the third or the fourth. The competition is one thing, but it's really about embracing who you are and not just yourself in that art or athletics or science. There's a person there too. And with all the social media now, that may even be harder now for this generation, that they're getting liked for everything they do, little tap dances or so forth. But who are you without those likes? In my day, it was more of like, does the ballet master like what you're doing? Are you as skinny as everyone? Are you keeping up? Is your body perfect? There's so much about the external, and I think it's even more external now. What is your internal life? How are you responding to other people? Can you listen to someone else that doesn't have to do with the particular art or craft you're in? So something about developing a little more of oneself, and finding a voice in something that is other than just the thing that you do, because you become like a little robot.
Yeah. Well, and I see that in regards to what we're saying now to the young people. What would you say to the parents? Because I think so much of this is driven by parents that almost want to live through their child by constantly pushing, or thinking that if they push a little bit harder, they're going to have that child that's going to win it all, whatever that particular sport or thing that they're trying to do the very best at.
Wow. Well, I think that has to do with, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak as honestly or as truthfully as I'd like to, because I don't know what I would do if I had a daughter or a son who was as driven as I was. And I know it kind of drove my mom crazy. Or if she was a little crazy, it probably made her worse, because I was so directed and so focused. But it takes that kind of focus. So the parents have to have their own interests in order to not bank everything on the success of that child or children, however many they have that are gifted at what they do. There's a certain amount of support that has to happen, because you can't accomplish as much as one can accomplish when you're that young without a little bit of support. And that could be the parents, but some kids get it from a mentor, from a school, or from someone that just finds their talent in just like basketball players, or it isn't necessarily the parent, but when they're very young, they're usually at home. So how does a parent find that way to support without making that is the only thing we love you for? And that was the dilemma that I came to, that if I wasn't that perfect ballerina, my parents wouldn't love me anymore. And I had to be that person. And so I had to go through the struggles of that. I was lovable without that. I didn't have to show anyone that I was okay. So, but you don't want to take their confidence down, and you want to give them some support to continue to maybe accomplish. So it's a dichotomy, and I think it's probably very challenging with a talented or gifted child.
Yeah, and I mean, what I hear you saying, and I don't know the situation in particular, but what parents can do is focus on the fact, in other words, still help them with whatever it is that is their passion, but at the same time, show them that they are loved no matter what happens. They are loved, when they are, playing in the backyard with the dog as much as they are when they're doing their craft, or when they're at the
Right.
dinner table. So that would be the thought, that it's kind of what I hear you saying is that.
Yeah, I think I think so. But when you have a very obsessive compulsive child who's good at what they do, I'm sure that because children are much more they don't you don't develop empathy for a long time. It takes a long time unless a child is exposed to a lot at a very, very young age. So how do you find that balance to encourage them and then not make them or have them understand that that's not all that they are? I think that's the balance, and not play games with it that way. I think my parents kind of played games because they were always like, well, just go to college, you'll be fine. It's like, no, I'm not going to college. Ballet dancers don't go to college. That's not what it is. But I think maybe the ballet dance, I'm going to go specifically with ballet dancers because it is that's the specific art that I wrote about and what I, fell apart from, is that I think they're being a little healthier now with raising ballet dancers in the sense of they're being careful about not telling them how fat they are when they weigh 90 pounds. Because back in my day, I mean, there were girls that died from anorexia and bulimia because your heart just stops. The parents in that there's some eating disorders that come along with that, and that's another health issue with a lot of young women and maybe some young men today, that one has to be perfect to do a certain kind of art, and that's a hard thing in a family. There's a lot of attention around that, and I think can be a little unhealthy. So how to be healthy with that so that the person, the girl or the boy, knows that they can eat, that they can study, that they can have friends, and still really focus on what they're doing, and that the parents have a separate life from that, and it doesn't matter whether the child is successful or not.
Right.
Just support what the child loves to do for as long as you can.
Well, now let's talk a little bit about the book and share a little bit about first what you went through so people understand that, but then what you did to pull yourself through that.
Well, the last job that I had was a very lovely job at the Cleveland Ballet because I'm very tall, and the artistic director there liked tall dancers, so I fit in pretty well. And with no specific reason, I was fired. And I'd always, and people get fired from jobs all the time, and I never got a great explanation. So my tendency towards getting my self-image, my identity, was completely dissolved. And I was already almost 24 at this time. So I was a young adult, but I'd been through this process of, okay, I hadn't been fired before, but you get a job, you don't get a job. This was my best job, I think. So when I was told I was fired, the whole sense of self went away. And I did, try to function. I had to move. I ended up moving back to my parents' house. And because I just had such terrible depression from it. And it was affecting me in the sense that I wouldn't go audition for another company because I said, well, you must know I must be terrible. And that wasn't necessarily the reason. This kind of thing happens all the time. So at my parents' house, which was not a good decision, but nonetheless, I felt like I needed some kind of support. My parents basically said, in a nutshell, we told you so. Mm. So in some way, and then my mom, who happened to was a nurse, became like my caretaker while I fell apart. Like I couldn't get up off the couch. The depression affected my whole body. And I just didn't have that core to say, well, I just move on and I go audition for another company, stay in shape. And I did for a while in New York before I came back to LA. But the mental state affected me so deeply that I didn't have the spirit to dance anymore. And that, what finally happened, it was 8 months of this, which is basically clinical depression. I mean, I did not get up off, I mean, I got off the couch to go to the bathroom and to get something out of the refrigerator, but I finally and then I explain this in the book through, I try to use some humor because it's humorous, but it really isn't. I tried to make it humorous because it's kind of ridiculous what I did. I finally went to, after a psychiatrist, I did get to a psychiatrist, and in those days, the antidepressants, it was not Prozac, we weren't at Prozac yet, was Tofranel, pretty big antidepressant. And I looked in the Merck manual what the side effects were. And one was obesity, loss of libido, possible suicide, possible death. So I'm reading this and I'm going, Mom, I'm not going to get fatter than I already am because I already gained weight from not dancing. And I was used to being skeletal, basically. So we tried another thing. We went to more of a holistic doctor and I got some antidepressant sort of thing. And I went back to, after I had a couple sessions with her, I went back to my journals and I was kind of a spirited person. I loved what I did. I was around people all the time. I was within a community. I kind of loved life because of what I did. So I had to go back to say, okay, I was not always this depressed person. I sort of like slowly but surely, I took all my money from unemployment. I went to a healing spa, which had some therapy there. So I swam every day. I was not around a television or a radio. I had a roommate there. It was up in Temecula. It was like in the desert, which I'm not a big desert person, but whatever the case, I needed to be out of my parents' house. I needed that influence. I needed to be away from that to hear my own voice. And slowly but surely, after that month, I came back to my parents' house, got a job as a waitress, had decided that, well, I'm going to try acting. Like, that's what I'm comfortable with on stage. That's what I'm comfortable with. That's what I loved. And I made step by step. I moved out within 2 weeks. I was living with a friend. And then another 2 weeks, I had my own apartment. So step by step, I learned how to be a person without dance. And it was not easy at all. It was like stepping out of my own clothes. I was just so naked. But I learned to communicate with people because as a waitress, I mean, you can't be afraid. I was afraid to speak with people unless it was just one-on-one with my little dancer friends, chat or whatever. But I was a very quiet person because dancers express through their bodies. And so I had to learn to be a waitress. And then I'm going into acting class and I'm like sitting there, oh my God, I don't even know how to say my name in front of these people. So it was extremely, so I think becoming an actress was like such a challenge for me because I did not like to speak. And I didn't really I wrote in my journals all the time, and writing this book was like, I wasn't really a writer. I was a physical person, like an athlete. Mm-hmm. So this is, many, many years later. It took me a lot of distance to write the book, a lot of distance away from that recovery.
Now, what do you think was the turning point to where you were able to get your voice? Because I think that seemed to be a big shift for you when you were able to find your voice and realize that you had something to say and you could project that rather than doing everything with just your movement.
I think it's after years of waitressing, and then I became an art model, which you don't say anything, but people seem to like me. Then I became a yoga teacher, and I couldn't play a character. I had to be myself, and I had to try to calm people down, being a kind of nervous person myself. I think with doing all the small plays, I did tons of plays when I was younger. The plays, finding these incredible writers that helped me find a voice through another character. Embracing literature like that, great literature. I'm a big Tennessee Williams girl. And then being a teacher, because I never wanted to be the head of something. Because when you're a yoga teacher, you walk into the room and you sit at the front of the class and everybody's waiting for you to be the voice of reason or the voice of calmness. And I think, and then I ended up finding a community at the place that I teach in Pasadena. and just wonderful, wonderful people that have nothing to do with acting, or most of them don't. Just incredible humans in all different fields. And I think that, and I've been there for 24 years. So I think that's when I started to have a voice. I mean, so that's a long time, but it was a long time moving up to that place, because dancers don't, I mean, if you listen to interviews with dancers, some do, but that's not their, having a voice is not really their main thing. And athletes maybe more now of this generation, because they're given these platforms and they're making so much money, and people really look up to them. So they're taught maybe earlier on to have a voice in some way so they can sell products. But that was never the dance world. That was not the world I grew up in. It was, more for the art.
All right. We have a listener question that has come in. And again, I want to thank those that take the time to send these questions in. You can always send them in either through the website or instant message us. This one reads, my daughter, who just started her junior year in high school, is a very talented gymnast. Last summer, she had an injury they called ankle impingement syndrome. After months of rehabilitation, the doctors are saying that the area may never be strong enough to sustain the impact of the landings, and they're also worried about long-term issues. She gets upset when I bring up the topic of discontinuing her training, as I feel her image and self-esteem are very tied to this sport. I was searching for something to help her when I noticed this interview coming up. Do you think your book will help her? I am thinking of buying it and having one of her friends give it to her instead of me, so that she'll be more receptive. Can you speak to this? And this is from Bev in Colorado.
Oh, I can speak to this because that is a real big turning point age, especially for a gymnast. It's even a younger sport or art than dance, because it's so extremely difficult what they do with their bodies. I think the beginning of my book thing is, my book gets into some areas that are a little mature for her. It gets into sexuality and not having a voice with men. I think the early part of, so how do you give a book to someone? I would love for her to read it, because I've had a therapist say and a couple of my students say, I think every young woman should read this book. But be prepared for, and maybe the kids are a little more advanced now these days, where it goes in my 20s, how clueless I was about relationships, and how my self-image as a dancer was going to affect me even that late in my mid-20s and even late 20s, and how not having a voice allowed me to be abused by some men. Mm. And that does come up in the book. It's not the whole book.
Right.
So, but the beginning of it might be very helpful, because of her, it sounds like she's incredibly focused on what she does. And I do cover that in the first 10, 15 chapters of the book, 10, 12 chapters of the book. So it might be helpful. I would hope it would be, just the psychological thing, and how one can recover from such obsession.
So Bev, if I can make a suggestion, that you get the book, but that you read it yourself, because I think that's going to become a decision that your daughter better in regards to if you then want it to be passed to her. But it does sound like something that could be of great value. So, and we're going to take a break, but for everybody out there, please stay with us. So we are speaking with Susan Priver, and the book is called Dancer Interrupted. We will be right back. You're listening to Answers for the Family.
Founded over 30 years ago to meet the needs of families in crisis, West Shield has continually focused on resolving issues that negatively impact families and businesses. Our signature therapeutic transportation service helps to ensure that adolescents in crisis are safely transported to specialized schools, programs, and treatment centers with unsurpassed experience and success. We are supported by our full-service licensed investigation agency that has legally, professionally, and compassionately located hundreds of runaways and teens. We are experienced and qualified to help, offering solutions which may include referrals to our international network of top professionals in the fields of educational consulting, psychology, psychiatry, and investigations. Simply put, West Shield Adolescent Services and West Shield Investigations are the best solutions when your family is facing a personal crisis. Call 1-800-899-8585, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 800-899-8585, or visit our website at westshield.com. Thank you.
And we're back. Susan Priver is with me, and we are talking about Dancer Interrupted. And before we went to break, and we were talking a little bit about maybe some advice that would be for someone who was a junior in high school and how the book would fit. It actually got me thinking, what advice would you give to those of us who are older and who may have abandoned those talents for whatever reason, and but we long to get back in touch with the creative dreams that we had, and we may not be able to do, especially if it's athletic, we may not be able to do the same type of thing, but if it's more creative, I think there's lots of other things that we can get back into that, again, we may have been taken, it may have been taken away from us. It could have been from an injury. I think for many people, you know, you get married, you have children, and you decide you're going to make different decisions. But I think we have that creativity sitting back in the back of us. Were you able to still pull that out and use it? And if so, what would you recommend to the rest of us?
Well, I'm going to agree with you on that. I think when you get into that part of your life where you're going to be having kids and raising a family, that perhaps that young thing that you did just gets totally pushed by the wayside because one has to take on responsibilities of taking care of a family or even just taking care of yourself. So for me personally, I created a life so I could always be creative. I did not have children. And I talk a little bit about that in the book. But your creativity, I think it's always there. So maybe even if you were a dancer or an athlete or a painter when you were young, it may be something else that I think those of us that are older start to find. I mean, I didn't know I could write, but that creativity that I had as a young dancer was there, and I had a voice in putting it onto the page. So whether you were drawn to art or writing or music, the only things that I don't think you can become an athlete or a dancer at a late age. It's, you know, you have to, it's physically hard, but I think, you know, I think our creative minds, once you've raised your kids, they're ripe and ready to go. And if you don't use that creativity, it's something I've discovered, it can turn into destructive energy. Whether you're destroying people around you or you're angry, use it in something beautiful. Whether it's writing a poem or if you're more visual, painting, or go to a class. I mean, now we have to do everything on Zoom, but there's so much offered, especially, all over the country. There's so much to do, and to find your creativity later on is so fine. The kids are all creative. It's just where it's directive. It's just that we have to go to school. We have to do so many things that maybe kind of we're more interested in, but find that kid in yourself that loves to create, to make something. And it's very satisfying to make something, I think.
Now, getting back to the book for a moment, one of the questions that I had meant to actually bring up earlier was, how did you choose the title Dancer Interrupted? Because it seems like it can have much more meaning. And I'm curious as to what your thoughts were when you decided that.
My first title before I'd even written the book, because I had so many journals of like just expressing my feelings of what was going on over the years, was Diary of a Mad Ballerina. And that eventually, just as I started writing it very early on, there hasn't been a book written about the afterlife of a ballet dancer. And most of the dancer books that have come out really are about dancers that have had a certain amount of fame or a certain amount of great success. I had a minimal success in that I did dance professionally. But the afterlife of an obsessive person or someone who's failed at what they are good at. I'm sure it's been done with executives or different kinds of artists. I never read one of a dancer. And I know interrupted has been used before, but Dancer Interrupted just is the umbrella title of like, what happens after? What does one do after you've lost the thing you love most and the thing that gives you absolute meaning in your life? So, I mean, there could be other titles, but I like that one. I just liked it.
Well, so I'm also someone who has done yoga. So
Okay.
how has that helped you? Because when I read it and I thought, there are certain poses that I still can't do, and but yet, there are other people, and it seems like, gymnasts or ballerinas or whatever would be perfect for this in regards to doing all the poses. Did that help give you some confidence that when you started doing that and realized that you probably adapted to it really quickly?
I did adapt to it pretty quickly because I'd been a dancer, but I hadn't danced for 5 or 6 years by the time I got to yoga, because everybody was doing aerobics then. even though we had Center for Yoga here in LA, which is where I started. I adapted to it very quickly, and it was incredibly healing for me, along with some therapy too, because my original connection to my mind was through my body, and it is mind, body, spirit. So it was very helpful in just all the other things that I was doing in my life, studying acting, going on auditions where it's very, very tense and very stressful. It was awful, actually. It was really great for me. Driving around with no air conditioner in my car in the heat of LA. But it was helpful for me, and it was an environment for me back in the day that was so uncompetitive. It was not about that. There were no mirrors in the room. There are no mirrors in yoga unless you do Bikram yoga, which I do not do. So for me, that was just like, ooh, I can be in my body and I don't have to do anything for anyone else. It's for me to feel better. And I think, and the poses are helpful for one's musculature and for the nervous system. So it's been a great thing for me. And then I ended up becoming a teacher because it came pretty easily to me. But now as I'm older, you just get tighter. I mean, it's just what happens. It just happens.
Now, one of the other things you mentioned in the book, and it's a quote that I think many of us have heard if we didn't see it on TV or something like that. But you talk about a statement that your mother used a lot with you when you were young, which is many are called, but few are chosen. How did that affect you, and how did that make you feel from the standpoint of essentially you're being told you are chosen for this, as if this is your chosen duty or your chosen path?
I think it was something that she probably heard in her early childhood as a devout Catholic. I think it's something of that. But she would say that a lot, I think, to make me feel like, well, you were called. And but you weren't, after I got fired from the Cleveland Ballet, and I have this in the book, that message went through my mind. Well, I was called, but the reason why I'm fired is because I was not chosen. So anytime anything bad ever happened to me, or I didn't get an audition, or, just wasn't feeling good about myself, this line would just go through my head, that chatter of that, which I don't know if that's a great thing to tell a child. Kids are really absorbent. They take it like it's really serious, as opposed to, oh, you'll do better next time. Oh, there's still something out there for you. There's another company that likes tall dancers or whatever, just something more positive that would have been like, just pick yourself up, you'll be okay, as opposed to, you just weren't chosen. So it wasn't, listen, God bless my mom. She just passed away just a few months ago, but she did the best she could with what she was given. I am totally at that, you have to forgive, because
absolutely.
hard being a parent and to any children, I'm sure. I mean, you know. So
Now,
yeah, that line is in the book.
yes, yes, it is. Um, Now, you also mention in the book that many of your formative relationships instill the idea that love is gained by being controlled by another person. And then you talk about how later in life you were able to break the pattern of your youth and forge relationships that encourage you to express yourself and live your truth. How did you break out of the cycle of these controlling relationships and claim control of your own life?
I think it had to do with self-esteem. And as a dancer, or maybe an athlete too, I'm not sure, or any kind of artist, if you're in the performing arts, you're often, if you're young, you're often controlled by the director, the people around you, the head of a company, or, if you're a young actor or whatever, you are basically an instrument, or the choreographer, you're the instrument for their voice, and you do what they say. So I was raised with that. And I felt that in my family too, that I was sort of the one without the voice. I just do what everyone says. So that's part of my family dynamic and part of my growing up in the ballet world. So it reflected in my relationships with men that I had to be told what to do in order for me to feel loved. And until I developed confidence as a human being, for me to say, no, I won't take that. No, I don't deserve that kind of treatment, that I'm okay without you treating me like I have no mind or nothing to offer. It took building confidence, and teaching yoga and becoming a good actress helped me. I mean, I do have the thing of wanting to be good at something that I do. Maybe all humans do, but that is just a part of me personally, that I need to be good at what I do, or I try to be good at what I do. That perfectionist thing never leaves you, but I try to not be a perfectionist anymore, because nothing's perfect. Can't have that anymore.
Is there any particular point you're gaining confidence, but was there any particular point or event that you felt was a turning point in making that shift to where you were no longer feeling like somebody had to tell you what to do?
Gosh, it really wasn't that long ago.
It's like,
It was
yesterday when I woke up.
no. It's been a while. I think this is probably the last long-term relationship that I had. I mean, I've had two, and I'm in one now. The last long-term relationship I had, my boyfriend at the time or my partner at the time was directing a play that I was in. And he was demanding something from the producer and demanding something from me that I couldn't give him. And I realized he treated me like I was just a minion, and that I had lived with that even as an adult. I was already 40 something. And I was like, wow, I can't say for myself what I feel about this, because he won't allow me to, or it will push him down so far that I'll just hold my tongue on that, because I can't do that. When I realized that I was holding my tongue on things that I felt very strongly about. And the relationship I have now, I can say, yeah, we have our problems, but I can express myself and say what I feel about something, whether it's a creative thing or what's going on in the world. And it's just like it was a ding in my head. Wow, I don't have to be told what to do. I have an opinion of my own. I have feelings. It took a long time for me. I'm slow. I don't know.
Well, or you needed the right person, because it may be that it didn't have as much about you as it did about that person, and them being in a position of being, if they're a director or whatever, if they're
of power,
they're in a position of, they're used to directing people as to what to do, and maybe couldn't step out of that role when they're in the relationship and say,
right.
you know what, I'm now in a different setting. And it may be that you just found the right person now, that
Mhm.
that allows you to be you.
Right. There was something about being a bit of a doormat, I think, for other people because of the confidence I'd lost as a dancer and sort of traveled with me for quite a long time. And it's a terrible thing for an actor because
Oh,
you have to have very thick skin to be an actor. And it stayed with me for a very long time. Sort of that doormat. Okay, you know more. Everybody knows more than I do. Meanwhile, I have opinions about things. So yeah, perhaps it was the right person, but my antenna was always out for people who would mistreat me, and I have that in the book
mhm.
because it was
Good point.
familiar.
Yeah.
It was very familiar.
Well, and or at the same time, it's also what they're looking for. If that's what they want, then they have antennas out also that are looking for someone that's going to accept the way that they're going to do it.
Right, but neither party knows that they have the antenna out for those things. Neither party really knows until you go through some kind of revelation or therapy, you know, getting together with someone who can point out the reasons why you do these things. So dig down, why do you do this to yourself? And you continue to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think therapy really helps. And for me, the yoga helped too. So it just like made me feel a little more connected to my body. And I think what's happening now, because we're all on the computer all the time, we kind of leave our bodies to some extent. We're just like all in our heads. And it's so important to do something in your body that may be healing.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. We have another question or comment that is coming in. And again, I want to thank them for taking the time to do this. This one reads, it only takes one moment in time to forever change our life. Mine was an auto accident. As an avid runner and cyclist, I was left with too many broken bones, pins, and rods used to put me back together to ever be an athlete again. Thankfully, I discovered weight training and I just keep moving. As big as the physical recovery was, the greater challenge was the emotional and mental aspects, as it is so easy to become bitter and give up. Times are stressful now, and we must stay in that space of hope and gratitude. Your book is on the way from Amazon, as I also just downloaded Alan's gratitude journal. Thank you both for those inspirational tools that I can use myself and share with others. And this is from Jordan in California.
Oh, that's great. That there is that moment where it just everything changes. And then one has to learn to pick themselves out of that, or you just get lost in the muck. But congratulations to you for finding something that you can do, that you embrace your life force instead of letting it just die out.
You know, and she didn't talk about it, but much. But you know, right now, what are some of the things that you think that people can be doing to not get caught up in, you know, the fear of being quarantined, of being in your home because you're not getting outside, you're not socializing as much, you're not interacting with people as much. What are some of the things that you would suggest that people do to help get through this?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a hard time for all of us that like to be amongst other people, that like to just interact with others in order to feel our own life force. I think that if you can be outside with people, you know, and social distance here and there, because even though it's really nice to hear your voice, Alan, and have this connection, it's lovely. So we have to do some of this because we have to do so much of it on Zoom. Whatever you can do on Zoom, do that. That if you can see someone outside, if you're able to, once in a while, I do meet with a friend once in a while for coffee or something. I mean, obviously outside. Whatever physical thing you can do outside. I'm walking now at the reservoir, and I talk about that because I take my first walk at the reservoir was the first time I get up off the couch for my depression. So and I live pretty close to the reservoir now, the LA reservoir. So I walk there for 4 days a week or so, and being in nature helps a little. I think this is a very hard time for everybody. And I think we just have to hang on to those few friends that you have and don't just do it on social media, because I don't think it's as satisfying to just type out a few words. I think it's much more satisfying to do a Zoom call or a FaceTime call or a phone call. And if you are creative in any way, in writing, you have lots of time, or you're creative at all to paint. I mean, any way you can be creative or be amongst people at a distance, I think is helpful. And if you are a person that needs to be physical, I mean, do your workout at home. I mean, if you can. I mean, my guy has his weights, does weights while he's watching TV. I mean, whatever. I mean, whatever you can do. I mean, I know you can't go to a gym if you like a gym. I think this is a hard time for everybody. I mean, as far as just not having that literal human contact. Get an animal. Get a pet. Apparently the rescue places are pretty empty now, but there's always animals to rescue. But a little human contact. I know for me, when I really fell apart, I cut all human contact off. And yet, I mean, I was very young, because I didn't have anything to say to anybody except I'm a mess. And that's not a great thing to say to people all the time. People start to get tired of that. You know, you have to find something good to talk about, whether it's the dishes you're cooking, something.
Well, now for everybody out there, the book is called Dancer Interrupted. And the author that's here with me is Susan Priver. Susan, I assume the book is wherever books are sold. You can get it at, Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever.
It's primarily Amazon. They're selling it at Vroman's, because I teach in Pasadena. I have a following there. So you can get it at Vroman's right now, or Amazon. I don't know that Barnes and Noble has it, but okay. Amazon easy, and you can go to my website and it takes you right to Amazon.
Okay, and what is that website?
It's www.susanpriver.com.
All right. And so for everybody out there, if you're driving and you weren't able to write that down, you can always go to the answersforthefamily.com site, and we will have all of Susan's information there. Susan, thank you so much for coming on with us. And I really appreciate the fact that you have put the book out. You've shown vulnerability, and I think you're helping a lot of people by doing so.
Oh, I hope it does help people. I really do. I told my story. I didn't know if it would help people, but perhaps it will. Thank you so much for having me, Alan.
You're welcome. For everybody out there, did you know that navigating life in 2020 means that we are coping with around 5 million% more stimuli than we were just 50 years ago? Bob Hillary, author of Simplify, made a decision to reject this way of living after it made him gravely ill. Join us next Monday and learn what he did to cure himself and discover what Robert calls slow living. So he practices finding and accepting yourself away from the pressures and expectations of society that will allow you to not only envision a better future, but create one for yourself. And for everybody out there, please visit our archives of past interviews at answersforthefamily.com. You can subscribe to the show through iTunes, through iHeartRadio, Stitcher, YouTube, Spreaker, and SoundCloud, or all of them if you'd like. If you like what you hear, please leave a review. It helps us reach more people, and I want you to know that I greatly appreciate it. Also, the next time you're on Facebook or Twitter, please remember to stop by our page, check out some of our latest posts, and if you like them, please like us and spread the word. So for everybody out there, be good human beings, and be with us again next week on Answers for the Family.
You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza, right here on LA Talk Radio.